The Emancipation celebration is a story of African and indigenous peoples' triumph over European. The act of being free from bondage. It speaks to a process of liberation from influence, control, or the power of another from slavery. It is freedom from a system or systems of oppression. Emancipation in St. Lucia, the Caribbean, or the West Indies spans continuous, courageous, and critical attempts by the region's inhabitants, beginning with the first peoples, the Amerindians, to take back their humanity and reject European slavery and colonization. Enslaved Africans increased and sustained revolutionary activities during the late 18th to 19th century throughout the region's French, Dutch, Spanish, and British colonies. These revolts also influenced unrest among the region's indentured laborers in the British colonies. The Emancipation celebration is a story of African and indigenous peoples' triumph over European white supremacy. It is to remind our people of the victorious struggles of their ancestors and to engage their input in building of a new society, a society representing their own ideals, own cultural, social, economic, and political development, which are the prerequisites for a free and independent nation and region.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. On behalf of the government of St. Lucia, the Cultural Development Foundation, and Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center, I bid you a special welcome to this very important celebration of one of the major successes in our story, our emancipation. This is the 2024 Emancipation Lecture, which is presented by the Cultural Development Foundation, the government of St. Lucia, and the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. I want to make special acknowledgement of some of our guests, in-studio guests today. Recognize Dr. Monsignor Patrick Anthony, the founding director of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. Special recognition, and this one gives me tremendous pleasure, recognition of Senator Ember Charles, the chairman of FRC. We acknowledge the executive director of the Cultural Development Foundation, Mrs. Ramona Wynn, the acting executive director of the Folk Research Center, Mr. Melcher Henry. And this one which has given me lots of pleasure in the past and even today. Our Governor General Emerita, my Governor General for all time, Dame Paulette Louisy. I recognize brothers and sisters of the cultural fraternity, artistic fraternity, our one of our Lawen Creole is here with us. The archives, director of the archives, other past senators, cultural activists, cultural workers, and brothers and sisters of St. Lucia in general. Again, special welcome to this 2024 Emancipation Lecture. And to begin our proceedings today, we'll invite the Honorable Monsignor Dr. Patrick Anthony to bring God in our proceedings and bring our ancestors in our proceedings also. Dr. Anthony.
Bonjour tout le monde. Nous allons commencer pour la prière. Good morning, good evening. Let us begin with prayer. As our Master Ceremony says, in all things we bring God. En toute bagaille nous commettons bon Dieu, en mi-temps, en devant, derrière, tout bateau. Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, ainsi soit-il. Par bon Dieu, moi, temps, nous venons ensemble pour nous honorer, pour nous glorifier, pour nous wiboter pour la gloire que nous avons à son papa. Par nous n'y en Dieu autant nous, puisque c'est vous qui a libéré nous, papa. Nous avons célébré la libération, nous. Et c'est par la gloire, par la force, par la croyance, nous jouons la libération, nous. Nous avons montré nous qualité force là nous n'y en nous pour nous lutter gourmet pour liberté nous. Et puis aujourd'hui nous allons célébrer la liberté ça là. Heavenly Father, we thank you for being such an awesome God. A God who empowers us. A God who wants to set all of your people free. Don't want any of your people to be enslaved. This is why at this moment we thank you for the power you have given us to find the resources within our own spirits to set ourselves free, to liberate ourselves. Lord God, we thank you for our countries. We thank you for our liberators, those who have given their lives to set us free. We ask you to give us a sense of gratitude and appreciation for the history of struggle that is ours. May we continue in that spirit, Lord God, to set not only ourselves but others free, so that our lesson may become a symbol of who you are, a liberating God. Papa mon Dieu, c'est vous qui a toujours libéré Yeshua. Vous pas les pièces Yeshua c'était en esclavage. En l'histoire des hommes, nous avons une quantité d'esclavage. Même aujourd'hui, nous avons un esclavage, toute qualité différente esclavage. Mais par la grâce, nous avons lutté, nous avons gourmé, nous avons bataille pour nous libérer comme nous. Continuez à nous force là, papa. Force là nous briser une petite société comme ces pays noirs, petits pays noirs. Les grands pays veulent abuser nous. Ben nous force là pour nous comment pour libération nous papa. Pour toute cas de libération nous briser attends ça là papa. Nous comme nous ben nous force et puis quoi là. Et puis aujourd'hui quand nous venons ensemble pour nous écouter l'histoire ça qu'ils a fait là. Comme nous pour ouvrir sévère frère nous Morgan, qui a fait quantité de travail. C'est un grand honneur pour nous, comme Saint-Lucien, pour tant de Saint-Lucien, qui a fait quantité de travail, ça là. We ask you, Lord God, to open the heart of our brother Morgan, open his spirit. He has done so much research for our nation. Help us to now sit and bask and learn from his resources, Lord God. Bless our gathering today, Lord God, all of our cultural activists, all those who are promoting emancipation celebration in our country. May we as a nation recognize that unless we claim our emancipation and continue to fight for our emancipation, we may find ourselves enslaved. Set us free, Lord, and keep us free. We make this prayer to you, Father, through your Son, Jesus, union in the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, ainsi soit-il.
Merci, Papa. Et merci pour libérer nous en langage là. Comme nous savons, aujourd'hui, nous allons célébrer la libération nous. Libération nous en toute façon dans la vie nous. Expressement en langage. We are celebrating our freedom, our liberation in all aspects of our lives. And today especially in the area of our language, culture. We say a special thank you to Paba, not only for the prayers, but for the leadership he has given this nation in this process of our liberation, of our emancipation, of our reclaiming of our stories, and our showcasing of ourselves to the world in full beauty and pride. Thank you, Paba. And we continue now and invite the chairman of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center, Senator Ember Charles, to deliver a few welcome remarks.
Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde. I should have responded saying thank you, Mr. President of the Senate. Il a fait un plaisir pour dire bienvenue pour une grande occasion nous aujourd'hui. Go parole là à sous émancipation. En parole nous kaitan hod Bush exevel camarade nous frère nous Morgan Dalphini. Today feels like Ash Wednesday for me. Not because there was a pre-spring before, but because Carnival has just finished. And in fact, the last events that we were part of, Folk Research Center, was the Calypso show at Soufre, which, there was a renaissance after how many years of dormancy. But it's an opportunity for us to reflect like we normally reflect on Ash Wednesday. So the celebration of emancipation coming soon after Carnival is very, very important. Because for the past 3 years, emancipation has been celebrated as a big event. And for us at the Folk Research Center, it should be more than that. In fact, emancipation should be a period of education. And the term we used at the Folk Research Center when we started was conscientization. Raising the consciousness of people about what emancipation means. Emancipation what? From what? What freedoms are we talking about? For me, I just want to share a few quick points with you on my own vision of what should be considered in the celebration of emancipation. But before I start, I want to add both to the recognition that you made earlier. We have in our midst the principal of South Louis Community College, Dr. Marjorie Charles. I think I saw the executive director of events company of St. Lucia. Yeah, she's there? Ah, okay, see. And of course to add to the numerous other persons you. But one person I want us to remember as we speak on emancipation is Gregor Williams. Gregor, who has been chronicling our history and has reminded us of all of the trials and tribulations, and in fact some of the stories we'll be hearing for the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's largely due to the kind of awareness that Gregor's work brought to St. Lucia. So I want us to remember Gregor at this point in time. What freedoms are we talking about? I think for me, there has to be a freedom for young people in particular, to free themselves from the kind of peer pressures that they are under now, almost to deny who they are. Our taste buds are being changed by the pressures of economics and politics. We are eating foods that we don't produce. How can we be free when we can't even think for ourselves? How can we be free from when our institutions are still being captured by some of the classes in our society, whether it's political or economic classes in our society, because our laws have not changed fundamentally? How can we talk about freedom when we are still in doubt about Kweyol being a language? Nous avons toujours si Kweyol c'est un langage. Combien d'années nous d'impolitique Morgan Jadi nous Kweyol c'est un langage? What are we waiting for? We need to free ourselves from that. How can we speak about freedom when in our schools it's still a challenge for teachers and those who are cultural advocates to promote the teaching of history in our schools, especially Caribbean history? How can we talk about emancipation when these things are not happening? So I think after the first 3 years, there was the plan to have emancipation celebrations in a particular way. And it's time for us to take stock after these 3 years. Let's look at education and conscientization from the ground up. Let's look at emancipation not as solely big events, but as community events where people begin to reflect on history, reflect on what enslavement meant and being freed from enslavement. Let's reflect on these things. Let's reflect also, after having a good carnival celebration, on the creativity of our people. Let's reflect on whether we're going in the right direction as far as that is concerned. But I don't want us to miss the point that it's about a celebration. Emancipation observation is a celebration. And from 1834, there was a celebration which I have to continue to celebrate. But celebrate in a way with meaning. That meaning can be transferred to the new generation, the young people coming. Because what they're learning now, I think we have to be in doubt as to whether in the next few years, they'll be understanding our history as we understood it. So folks, I want to welcome you again to this lecture. And it's a very significant topic that Morgan is speaking on today. In English, it's called Uncovering History, Heritage, Resistance and Identity Rooted in Language. Nous avons découvert l'histoire nous, héritage nous, résistance nous, identité qui racine ça c'est un langage saint-lycéen, un langage Kweyol. With these few remarks, let me once again welcome those of you in studio and those of you in Cyberland to this very important lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Ember Charles. Peut-être nous ne pouvons changer non ça avec un autre non, Senator Embot. And of course, in all seriousness, we all in the artistic and cultural fraternity want to congratulate you on your appointment as an independent senator in the Parliament of St. Lucia. Okay, so let's get down to the business. Ember Charles has asked us to reflect. This is a time of reflection on our successes, on our development. And so, let's get into it. Of course, well, before we get into it, probably it is a good time to give you a little few seconds for preparation and take a break. So let's take a few seconds break, prepare yourself for our very special reflection and lecture with Dr. Dalphinis.
Staged reenactment of the Revolt Uprising. Story of the freedom fighter, 1795 to 1796. Thursday, August 1st.
The panel, the discussion, an objective and impartial view of the issues of interest to
Join NTN for a special panel discussion series of Nation Beat, Voices of Freedom, Honoring Emancipation. Historians, anthropologists, archivists, cultural icons, and everyday voices will bring you thought-provoking discussions of emancipation impact on today's society.
Most people in the society have not overcome the effects of enslavement, and we're talking black, Indian, white. Most people have not, but it would have impacted black males in a particular way. But yes, I believe that this has to be discussed and reasoned out within the context of a society that is still resisting a lot of change where the legacy of slavery is concerned.
The colonizing force was not interested in the small man, in the black man, and they effectively were ignored.
One of the ironies of our time is that the time period that you referred to, the 19, let's take from Garvey downwards, or even go back to Edward Blyden and them downwards, the Caribbean played a leadership role in the Pan-African movement. It's kind of embarrassing because you had those westernized Caribbean people speaking for Africa, but whether or not, I don't want to go into a deep critique of that, but the point is, the Caribbean played a leading role in Pan-Africanism.
Join us as we acknowledge the journey, honor the courage, resilience, and spirit of the ancestors. Voices of Freedom, Honoring Emancipation, a special Nation Beat panel series on NTN.
Malcolm X asked the question, who taught you to hate yourself? And in reply, I asked Brother Malcolm, who didn't? I mean, who hasn't? Every step towards self-love as a black person is revolutionary. Every embrace of skin, every pleased inhalation, every welcome caress is defiance. Black love has always been self-taught.
Keeping the memory of emancipation alive for future generations, because the story of freedom is our story.
Bonsoir.
Stage 3 enactment of the Revolt Uprising. Story of the freedom fighter, 1795 to 1796. Thursday, August 1st.
Welcome back, brothers and sisters, as we get into the meat of our lecture today. And it is my task to introduce our very, very, very special guest lecturer, Dr. Morgan Dalphinis. When I was checking on the biography of our friend at the Folk Research Center, our friend, our comrade, our worker, Dr. Morgan Dalphinis, I saw that his profession is an education consultant. His profession is education consultant. And I also saw that his nationality is written as British. Jamais pas. As moi connaître ces Dalphinis là, là où des sans vieux fort, où il veut Canel, et où commencer Canel pour y veut Gic Savane B. Et c'est Dalphinis là qui a conduit toute terre ça là. On te connaît Troy Dalphinis, tonton Morgan Dalphinis, et actuellement mon cas ouais nationality British. Jamais pas. Dr. Morgan Dalphinis is an original St. Lucian. I suspect you would even want me to say original African. Okay, so, all right, so we have taken that out. But he was born in St. Lucia, but he emigrated to England at the age of 11. And we are told that from his school days, he has been fascinated with different languages, especially the African and Caribbean languages, including his native Creole. He now has a PhD. He actually has a PhD in Caribbean and African languages. He has an MBA, he has a BA honors in linguistics and Hausa. He's a lifelong educator. He has taught at a number of schools in London, lectured in Nigeria, all over the world, literally. He has presented many, many papers at international conferences on Creole languages, published a number of poems in Creole and English. So he is a published author, actually. And one of his most iconic publications, I should mention here, is called Caribbean and African Languages, Social History, Language, Literature, and Education, published by the Carrier Press in 1985. And it has been a seminal publication for us and our work at the Folk Research Center, our work and understanding of our language and our culture and the African roots of our Creole language. He has also published some other books for those who will come after, a book of collected poems from 1968 to 1985. He has published Language, Blacks, and Gypsies. He has published Bois d'Ifé, Firewood, another book of collected poems. And here this one, Black People and Management, St. Lucian History and Language, another publication of his. And Decolonial Caribbean, Resurrecting the Ancestors Through Language. He has also published on Creole cultures, etc., etc. This is Dr. Morgan Dalphinis, St. Lucian intellectual, St. Lucian cultural researcher, resident in England. He actually speaks 4 languages: English, Hausa, French, and St. Lucian Creole. And if you have any intentions of tackling him, he speaks karate also. It is one of his favorite hobbies. So, and I should say that Dr. Dalphinis has been a key resource of the Folk Research Center. He has been a member, long-standing member of the Folk Research Center, but in terms of the research work of the Folk Research Center, and as you know, research is the fundamental, central work of the Folk Research Center, and Dr. Dalphinis has been a tremendous resource since the beginning date of the Folk Research Center. So it is with tremendous pleasure and gratitude from us in St. Lucia that I invite to address us today Dr. Morgan Dalphinis. And his theme, title, topic today is St. Lucian Kweyol, Uncovering History, Heritage, Resistance, and Identity Rooted in Language. AP Senator Mbot te banou traduisez ça en créole banou, il a dit Créole Saint-Lucie. Nous avons découvert l'histoire, héritage, résistance, identité nous qui racine ça en langage nous. I invite Dr. Morgan Dalphinis to address us.
Merci un pile pour ces bons mots ça là. Jodi jou, chez moi ouvert goin kon banan kon goin bois. It has opened wide as the flowers on a banana tree in the wild woods. In terms of the identity, it has always been St. Lucian. But I had a colonial passport when I went to Britain. I then had to, in order to stay in England, you then had to sign a piece of paper to get your British passport. So that is the track of identity. But going back to what I am to talk about, really Creole origins, society, identity, with a few remarks on emancipation and independence. I think, I think that, if I look for the thing there, if I press it, you have to set it on.
Yeah.
Okay, it's set there. So it's this one. So basically, okay, I'll have to ignore that it's not moving on the screen. In terms of the main points, would you like to amend it again? I'm sorry, but it's moving on the computer, but it's not moving on your screen. So we'll have just a few minutes to deal with that. That's all right.
Staged reenactment of the Rabot Uprising. Story of the freedom fighter, 1795 to 1796. Thursday, August 1st.
Join NTN for a special panel discussion series of Nation Beat, Voices of Freedom, Honoring Emancipation. Historians, anthropologists, archivists, cultural icons, and everyday voices will bring you thought-provoking discussions of emancipation impact on today's society.
Most people in the society have not overcome the effects of enslavement, and we're talking black and black, Indian, white. Most people have not, but it would have impacted black males in a particular way. But yes, I believe that this has to be discussed and reasoned out within the context of a society that is still resisting a lot of change where the legacy of slavery is concerned.
The colonizing force was not interested in the small man, in the black man, and they effectively were ignored.
One of the ironies of our time is that the time period that you referred to, let's take it from Garvey downwards, or even go back to Edward Blyden and them downwards, the Caribbean played a leadership role in the Pan-African movement. It's kind of embarrassing because you had those westernized Caribbean people speaking for Africa, but whether or not, I don't want to go into a deep critique of that, but the point is, the Caribbean played a leading role in Pan-Africanism.
Join us as we acknowledge the journey, honor the courage, resilience, and spirit of the ancestors. Voices of Freedom, Honoring Emancipation, a special Nation Beat panel series on NTN.
Malcolm X asked the question, who taught you to hate yourself? And in reply, I asked Brother Malcolm, who didn't? Who hasn't? Every step towards self-love as a black person is revolutionary. Every embrace of skin, every pleased inhalation, every welcome caress is defiance. Black love has always been self-taught.
Keeping the memory of emancipation alive for future generations, because the story of freedom is our story.
Merci encore. We were talking about origins,
society and its relationship between language, emancipation, and independence. I will take these in this order of origins, then society, then emancipation, then independence. One of the things that we often do not acknowledge in a lot of St. Lucian and Caribbean history is the place of Africa within it, that all history begins in Africa. We as Africans began in Southern Africa and in Eastern Africa. We then populated the whole planet, moving into Europe and then into the Americas. We, in doing that, created various civilizations, the important one being Egyptian civilization, and then the civilizations in West Africa, of Ghana, of the Mali Empire, created by a musician called Sunjata, who initially in childhood was disabled. We then created the Songhai Empire, which was led by Sunni Ali, a supreme technician who had his capital moved for strategic reasons in various places over time. He practiced African religions and remained that way till the next emperor. We then had a number of migrations. Some of us did not like the king-centeredness of the West African empires, and we moved south into what were called the Bantu migrations. And the Bantu migrations led to groups who were more involved in communal enterprises. So when they talk about Bantu, they talk about people. When they talk about Mun, that means person. And when they talk about the word I was struggling with, Ubuntu, it is working together. We also had the civilizations of Meroe, the Meroitic civilizations, and these were led by women. So most of them were called the Candace, meaning the queens. They led these empires. What affected St. Lucia? In St. Lucia, the migrations of the Mandinka as empire builders led to many of them being sent to St. Lucia. When you are in the process of expanding your empire, you conquer people, and in some cases, you sold them off to be enslaved. In the Wolof caste system, we had a group called the Tondion, the warrior caste, and they were annoyed with the royalty. What they then did was obviously export some of the royalty, and so we may have some unhappy royals in St. Lucia. The next group were the Fulani. The Fulani were what you would call Islamic fundamentalists. So from as far as Sudan into the west coast of Africa, they practiced jihad, holy war. And in that, they spread a word called Juka, which most of us recognize as juk. What we're talking about are the Fulani jihadists and their raids across West Africa, leading to some of us ending up here. Next, we have the people from the empires of Ghana, in which the competing groups were the people called the Fanti and the Chui. What happens was that the Fanti annoyed the Ashanti by killing one of the Ashanti Hene, one of their kings. So the Ashanti then swore blood oaths, i.e. it's an oath related not only to me, but my children and my children's children. They took their revenge on the Chromanti and sent some of them here. As well as that, we had people coming from the kingdom of Dahomey, the place where we get the word Nenen. it's a Dahomean word. What is different in Dahomey is that it is a group of many ethnicities. The other groups I talked about were more mono-ethnic. But in terms of the Dahomeans, it was a structure in which many other groups were. But with expansion led to some of them being exported here. And partly the Haitian song, where the singer says, "Ay, ay, ay, awadaja twai mwen, awadaja chwe mwen. Look, Arada has killed me, Arada has betrayed me." As well as that, we have the Igbo people, in which many of them came here into St. Lucia, but what was happening in West Africa was a competition about trade. Who could get the greatest trading area? And those who lost, again, the conquered were sent in this direction. In terms of the other group, the Kikongo and the Umbundu, it was mainly a situation of civil war. So you have the Umbundu against the Kikongo, and songs which Robert Lee knows I like to sing about, "Ay, ay, ay, ti Congo kana viji mama, ti Congo kana viji papa." The little Congo is on the waves, the little Congo is navigating. But they don't also tell you about a whole group of people in St. Lucia, or certainly one woman, giving me a whole list, which I got from the Folk Research Center, of words in Umbundu, because the conflict there was in terms of full-scale civil war. So you get the Kikongo and the Umbundu on this side in St. Lucia, right down to things that we eat. Have you eaten your Angolan peas today? The Angolan area is the place where you get the Umbundu and the Kikongo. In terms of what is left as our inheritance, it is the grammar of Creole, which is dominantly African. So you have, with the French, the people from Senegal and Gambia, the Wolof and Mandinka in St. Lucia, the Angolans who brought Kikongo and Umbundu, as well as the Ewe Fon. Even their title shows you the kind of multi-ethnicity, that the Ewe are mainly people of Yoruba origins, and the Fon are people mainly of Ghanaian origins. It was a multi-ethnic state. In terms of the Africans then brought here by the British, it was the Igbos coming from eastern Nigeria, Ghana, the Twifanti, and from western Nigeria, the Yoruba, giving us a West African and Bantu grammar with European vocabulary. We had no choice in vocabulary. It was enforced on us. There was even a mask with a plug inside of your mouth and prongs of iron on either side in case they caught you speaking an African word. They were worried that us plotting in an African language meant that we were going to kill them. In terms of the next slide, it's really showing you how the yellow part is where we mainly came from, i.e. the languages of the Niger Congo. And in terms of the mauve area, you wouldn't get many of us coming from there, because there you have the Kalahari Desert. So the enslavers did not want to run into a desert to go and get slaves. So people like the great Nelson Mandela, who is one of the San, who lived in that area, were quite safe. However, the rest of us were less safe. In terms of St. Lucia, we have a Mandinka and a Wolof grammar, because those were the first groups here. So they built the structure in which the other people then came and evolved Creole. So in Wolof, you would say garabla, the tree, meaning tree the. And in St. Lucia, you would say pieboa a, tree the. In Mandinka, you would say sungut o, girl the. And in St. Lucia, you would say tifi a. We go even further, we use the ka. We say mwen ka vini, mwen ka fe sa. However, in Mandinka, you would say mka moi. We even import the ma, mang, meaning I am not doing something. This is reinforced by other elements from other African languages, such as Twi, where we put the equivalent of ka in the same place. So the Twi would say mereko, I am coming, and we would say mwen ka vini. But although we have the structural similarity, we go right down to the actual word ka. In terms of our African cultural inheritance, it's often heard in storytelling. There's the story of New Nok, a slave at the Beauséjour plantation, and it is said in the story, yo van li pou wash, yo van li pou plash, monsieur yo jik van li pou glow. As well as that, we have our story Ting Ting. Tout sa bon Dieu mette a sous la terre. But all you're saying is Taling, Taling in Mandinka and Jola. And we have the story of Gwoboudin, Patfin, and Guanjol. This is literally a word-for-word translation of a cycle of tales about the spider, and these three are seminal characters in this cycle of tales. We also have proverbs, which are word-to-word translations. Si ouè bab kamawadu pui di fe, ki sa ou ni pou fe? Voye glo asu sa ou? In Hausa you would say, Inka gage mundang uwanka, ya kama wuta, seika shafa wanakarua, word-to-word translation. We go down to the structures of our singing of our chantwell. Our chantwell would sing in a call and response form. We're even used to it. We listen to Bob Marley and he says, rebel music. And the I3s reply, rebel music. And similarly, in our songs, the chorus is always there. You may have a song going, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Mwen di neg la, ay travay pou la vili. Mwen di neg la, ay travay pou la vili. It's a story which goes on, but the chorus mean la 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 la, la 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 la, and all of our songs fall in that same kind of structure. So this is a direct African inheritance. We also have inheritances from the Carib. They came as red Carib from the Gulf of Mexico. They go into the islands, they conquer the Arawak, and they have children by the women. They kill off the Arawak men, and they make what they call island Carib. These island Caribs are then attacked by the French and the English in St. Lucia and Martinique, and later on in St. Vincent, they merge with the African Maroons and become black Carib. They annoy the British so much that they deport them to Belize. So we get words such as moon, moon to person, in the black Carib of St. Vincent. We have the sequence of the 1655 French Island Carib Wars in Martinique. And you have the Caribs describing the cannons of the French as, say, a mabouya coming at them, like one of our lizards coming out of the mouth of the cannon. In St. Lucia, 2 French governors are killed off. by the island Carib in St. Lucia in 1654 and 1656. Even though one of these governors thought he was really sly, he married a Carib woman, but they still killed him. The Black Carib I've already talked about in St. Vincent and their deportation. But in terms of the St. Lucian area and Martinique, it was the people making almost their last stand, that they'd been fighting and coming down the islands and still fighting. And in St. Lucia and Martinique, they begin to make what they feel is their last stand. So we have with the red, the island Carib and the Black Carib, the flora and fauna words. Words such as Tululu, Mabouya, other words such as Agouti, Lebiche, all of those are Carib words describing the flora and fauna. The grammar has already been taken care of by the Africans. They are teaching us what is going on in this new environment, and those words have remained. We then move to the issue of society and culture, which I think is definitely one of resistance, revolt, and revolution. Our society has always been shaped by our abilities to keep fighting even after defeat, malgré tout. And with this resistance came the groups that I'd already talked about, the Senegambians, the Akan, and the Eastern Nigerians. But resistance had begun right there in Africa. So in 1594, the Diola, who I talked about, the Bainuk and the Balanta, actually burned Portuguese words as well as boats within the river Casamance. They saw the invader and they started burning them. In other places, such as the north of Nigeria, some of them ran away from the Arab invader to the high ground because they wanted to get away from the Arab horses. The fact that in the St. Lucian case, we were owned by the Compagnie des Îles d'Amérique, which had transformed its Senegambian assets into la Compagnie du Sénégal. Cette dernière compagnie a toujours nommé des gouverneurs à Sainte-Lucie jusqu'à l'an 1694. 12 of these years, this company had always named the St. Lucian governors, right up to the year 1674. This is important because the masters decided that, oh, I have just been transferred from Senegal. I'm now in this place called St. Lucia. I'll get my slaves right from where I come from. So the Senegambian issue is quite clear, right down to a St. Lucian chap who got a passport in Senegal to come to St. Lucia. The revolt part of our history is quite clear in terms of runaways from plantations, not only in St. Lucia, but also Martinique, and our revolution in joining the French Revolution. What were the favoring winds for us? The Petits Blancs went to St. Lucia, the Little Whites, and the Grands Blancs remained in Martinique because the Grands Blancs were satisfied. They'd got good areas of land in Martinique, but the Little Whites looked at this little island in a distance and decided that they would come here. So those people would be more attuned to the issue of revolt and revolution than the Grands Blancs. There were already Maroons in the hills and forests of St. Lucia. There was also the enforcement of the Code Noir, the Black Code. In Martinique pre-1724, if you had white blood, octoroon, quadroon, you were then automatically free. So to be white was a good thing. But however, Napoleon, in his wisdom, changed the Code Noir and decided 1 drop of black and you're dead. So, as far as he was concerned, a drop of black made you suddenly unfree. Lots of these Martinicans then took the boat into St. Lucia. And there's a sarcastic comment about Martinicans in St. Lucia at the time. The St. Lucians would say of them, "Vous c'est un sacré passe-pater." Man, you're a blasted, come by the land, when they knew that they came by boat. I hope they're not doing that these days. The choice made by the French soldiers and citizens in St. Lucia was favorable to the Declaration of the Rights of Man. The black population were extremely happy. Christmas and Carnival had come home. Look, it's legal to kill white people. And on top of that, some of the French revolutionaries would provide us with guns. So with that, the French Revolution was a big-time celebration in St. Lucia. The address of the planters and citizens of St. Lucia to Mr. de Damas, governor at the Colonial Assembly of Martinique, was like this: Nous bénissons la Révolution. Nous bénissions la Constitution qu'il nous a donnée. Nous le regardons comme la plus belle œuvre jamais de sortie de la main des hommes. Nous jurons tous de vie de combattre pour la défendre. We, as it says, we blessed the revolution. We thought it was the best thing that ever happened, the most beautiful work in the hands of man. We all swear on our lives to fight and die in its defense. However, the empire struck back. The St. Lucian rebels are invaded by 17,000 British troops. And this is an aside that Gregor Williams pointed out to me, that the song that we then have, which says, the grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He went on the top of the hill and he cut them down again. And when they were up, they were up. And when they were down, they were down. It didn't tell. What they didn't tell us, it was us driving them down. And it's them going up the morn. And then we drive them down. But overcome, I think our army was about 5,000. There were 17,000. We were defeated. However, we remained guerrillas in the woods, called l'Armée Française dans les Bois, the French army during the woods. The empire took revenge and deported us, or some of the leaders, on a boat to England. The boat was, funnily enough, called the London. And off the coast of Devon, it sank. As well as that, some of us were imprisoned and put in Porchester Castle in Hampshire, in England. In Martinique, the revenge of the empire was more thorough. They took some of the leaders to France, they interrogated them first, and then they deported them back to Senegal, where we came from, and put them in jail there. So, in terms of that, we may say we had external enemies. But we also had internal enemies. And the free coloreds of St. Lucia were that enemy. So in 1823, there were 8 free-colored militia companies to hunt runaway slaves and counter slavery revolts. They also petitioned the legislature, then British, to remove previous French legislation which restricted their rights in contrast to whites. Like in South Africa, the coloreds wanted freedom for themselves, but not the whole of black South Africa. We had the same problem there. As well as that, they owned 1/6 of all of the slaves of the island of St. Lucia. As far as emancipation is concerned, although it was declared, our conditions remained brutal. So, in that period, we have the declaration where the end of slavery is declared. We have an ex-slave in St. Lucia looking at the whole issue and saying, Pasav si wensalaka badine beche, lipaka badine neg. Don't you think this is a trick? That if this queen of theirs will tell lies to white people, won't she tell us in St. Lucia that we are free, that we are emancipated? So you can see that Kweyol has remained a source of critical thinking, analysis, as well as passing on the culture. As far as this emancipation was concerned, in 1845, East Indian labor was brought in. In 1850, liberated Africans were brought from Sierra Leone on ships into St. Lucia. And in one of the ships, we can make a comparison. On the ship called the Tusker, at least 8% died. So if we compared that to 10 to 40 per thousand quoted by Curtin, we can say, okay, there's been an improvement. But 8% death, and we're supposed to be emancipated, is a problem. But however, through Creole and other means, we kept freedom of the mind. Because you know what these Asian people who came here as indentured laborers did. And you know what these Sierra Leonean Africans did. They ran off into the hills and became Maroons in St. Lucia as well. So even post-emancipation, the strategies we used during slavery, we managed to pass it on to foreign people to the island to keep their freedom. We had kept freedom in the head in order to be strategic through Creole. As far as colonial rule was concerned, 1815 onwards, it was aimed at taming St. Lucians. The main group to do that were the Barbadians. In terms of neo-colonial rule, they featured as teachers and mainly as people characterized as whipping St. Lucians in the road and telling them not to speak Kweyol, because they were there to change our minds, to educate us, to make sure we spoke English. So that part of neo-colonial rule was carried out. However, ironically, a year after, 32% of the Bajans imported here were criminals. In 1905, many were in the police force. However, it was because many St. Lucians, given the history I've described to you, did not want to join the police force. They'd spent their lives fighting for their freedom against authority. So who was imported to do that? The Bajans came, not to sell cuckoo. As far as independence is concerned, we brought with it a capacity to express ourselves more openly in Creole. So our great singer, Cécile Descartes, will be singing Mama Eladi Why Wadlo Jabat Mama Why Wadlo Jabat Papa Why Wadlo Jibie Mawe Why Sase Kana Sovai Wadlo Jabat Mama Wadlo Jabat Papa. So what they're singing in Creole is not just a funny little song, you know, not just shaking themselves on the bum-bum wall. What she's saying is, Wadlo, the king of the sea, has beaten my mother. Wadlo has beaten my father. Wadlo is a savage seabird. Wadlo is a wild duck. she's describing colonial society. And she ain't like it. Il pas content, pièce. Our Nobel laureates continue the same theme. Walcott wants a Creole as part of cultural expression. So he tells us openly, moi c'est Jean Saint-Lucie, c'est là moi sorti. So he identifies, although his main, if you like, means of communication is English. Sir Arthur Lewis wants an economics in the developing world which will include St. Lucia and other then called third world countries. So Creole as a thread has been with us. We fought to create it, and then it re-engages with the future, where we say that we want not only emancipation but total freedom. Some of the themes of St. Lucian history are one, self-reliance. The Maroons, both under French and British rule, the indentured labor, and even to some extent the free-colored militia are all about self-catering. They're all about doing things for ourselves. Even the beginning of our bank, the Susu Bank, was begun by St. Lucian laborers who couldn't get a bank account. So they started off with Susu, and then, if you like, there was a counterattack by the rich people of St. Lucia who decided, boy, the wharf rat has a bank. So they put all their money in the same bank. But the lessons learned from slavery times to now, if you want to do something, do it yourself. Fais pour. Resistance, revolt, and revolution has been there. There's also, obviously, a racial issue in the acquisition of land. The French and British supporters in St. Lucia got paid back in land. So St. Lucians were rewarded for serving them. The practice of métayage, sharecropping, was another means of St. Lucians getting hold of land. However, this compares problematically with our present. So we spend all these years, by any means necessary, making sure we don't end up with not getting 4 acres and a mule. But in modern times, one gets the impression we want to give it away, man. Vini ici, garçon. Moi, ni passeport ba ou. Ban l'argent, ou peut pointer ça. Okay? But it's a diminishing resource. The ancestors fought for one thing. We seem to be in different practices. We have a color caste system that is inherited, that white skin is better. And indeed, one St. Lucian mathematician was saying to me, Morgan, it's improbable that we could get the number of light-skinned prime ministers unless there was some conditioning in our minds. Leaving that aside, we have the evidence of the free-coloreds. They looked for freedom for themselves, but not for the St. Lucian majority. There's also the question of legitimacy and non-legitimacy. Ish bata ek ish legitime. And you can see in that the creation of a permanent underclass. The master sleeps with the white woman and gives her children the assets. The master sleeps with the non-legitime and they get nothing. Indeed, in some cases, you could almost argue they're deliberately producing these children so that they could have slave labor after emancipation has been called. So in continuing such practices of inheritance, in St. Lucia, we're creating a permanent underclass. As I say in my book, who needs enemies? We grow our own. In terms of leadership and management in St. Lucia, discipline and leadership is clearly what our maroon leaders have left us with. Because those leaders are models of self-sacrifice. They fought and lost in the French Revolution. What do they then do? Go into the forest and fight. They fought and are defeated again. They're exported back to Sierra Leone slave forts and exported back to Gorée. And what do the slavers in Gorée say? Oh, these people imported back from St. Lucia and Martinique, they keep plotting revolution. So we are undefeated as leaders when we are on the right road. Our modern leaders and modern politics, and I'm sure our senator is not going to be like that, have a self-discipline and self-sacrifice second to none. In terms of modern issues, we also face some issues of the modern world. We all started, like described of myself, from a collective community. Puendekai, Wane, etc. This is just where Dalphinises were. You just ran around and all you saw was Dalphinises. And we all came from communities like that all over St. Lucia. From that, we moved to what was called the nuclear family, Troy's family, Enoch's family, and all these other nuclear families in St. Lucia. We then moved to what I call the cricketing age of Lara. Everybody for themselves, garçon, c'est moi qui vle bat. Si c'est moun lan Afrique, dis-moi moi kay kase apartheid pour vini, moi ka vini, moi ka foot vini. You know, I don't care about breaking apartheid rules. I am Lara. I am the great man. Okay? And this attitude of brilliant individualism is what we have in the modern times. I'm sure some of the gang lords and the gang rulers in this town are people who are very clear that the individual is all that matters. Okay? Moi vle l'argent garçon. Ouais. Si moi ni pour chou, c'est chou nga chou. So we've moved from communal societies to nuclear, and in a sense, we've moved almost to a stage of a nuclear warhead of individuals. Violence that we usually reserve to the plantocracy who we'd killed or chased off under some periods of our history is now turned back on ourselves. So we're no longer going to hunt our enemies, the people who we hunt ourselves. As I said before, who needs external enemies? We grow our own. There's also a kind of despair in which, in terms of the class structure inherited, if there's no way out for an underclass, which we keep growing, and no skills for them to find a way out educationally, then in a sense, we're creating a permanent war. As far as positive recommendations, certainly I can see, in line with Pip's suggestion, the need for Kweyol within our schools. I can also see a need for Kweyol in our high commissions, both in England, the USA, and elsewhere, because there are groups of people there from St. Lucia who need that connection. But also, I think it needs to include advice on skills and educational acquisition. I may have said to myself when I came to London, boy, you mean education is free here? Oh man, I'll study all the way to doctorate. Okay? But there are many St. Lucians who came on the same boat as me who did not seize that opportunity. So, what is best for a government to do? When they get into those areas, talk to their people who live there about the importance of skills, education for them to make progress. There's a need also, I think, for a science and manufacturing group on the lines of the Folk Research Center. I am quite clear in my mind that the Folk Research Center and other cultural groups in St. Lucia have made a tremendous contribution, a contribution beyond what they know, meaning that if I want somebody with some idea of culture from St. Lucia, I will get it, okay? The people, wherever they're coming from, have a notion. However, we are having a minority of scientists and manufacturing engineers, etc., who are growing up in St. Lucia and then going abroad and not feeling that they have a place to go. We need to address the situation soon. Otherwise, we're again evolving people who are only then fit for export because they'll be first in the queue. The other countries are already wanting them. We need to work on that. We then lastly need to talk about the return on capital employed in tax breaks and other issues to hotels. We give the hotels tax breaks, we give other foreigners other inducements. I think we need to be more financial about this. If I am giving you this amount of tax break, what am I getting back for it for the country? If I am saying to you, well, you can do a race course, you can do that, and you can do this, what is the money that is put back into the common purse for St. Lucia? Until we do that, we are just perpetuating a cycle of loss. I think, as I said, there's been a great opportunity taken by the current regime to introduce Kweyol into the school system. Teachers are being trained, and I think books are being written. There is, however, also a positive opportunity being taken to invest in ourselves after 40+ years of independence. This is significant because nobody invested in us learning Kweyol. The French and others did not teach us anything. From their point of view, the more ignorant we were, the better for them, the longer they could continue slavery. So not one penny was spent by the Europeans in helping elevate our minds. It was ourselves who evolved Creole using the words available and the grammar from Africa to be where we are today. So we need to take a lesson. If nobody is investing in us, we need to invest in ourselves. Nobody else is going to do it. Their perspective is always, well, they want to invest in their own people. They're interested in investing in China, investing in Indonesia, investing in Britain, investing in France. We do not necessarily have that same attitude of mind. Our ancestors had it, but somewhere along the line, we need to get it back. However, Kweyol has been the glue that has held us together and emancipated our minds. We need to appreciate it and continue forward. I'll end because I'm fairly sure I have overgone my time. End with a poem which I hope I can remember most of, but it's Gros Piton, Petit Piton. Chaque fois a dans la vie ka ban nou wash, la vie ka ban nou fe. Chaque fois a dans la vie, wash nan di fe ka vini a sou tête nou. Wash a sou wash ka fe gros piton sorti petit piton. Mon la vie nou ka plewe, ban nou di fe nan chè. Gros piton, petit piton. Nou la, gros piton, petit piton. Nou la, Go piton, piti piton. Nous là. Merci en pile.
Merci en pile, Dr. Dalphinis. And I'm sure all of you understand why I say this business of British nationality, a source of consternation for me. Ça, c'est vraiment Saint Lucien. This is one of our Saint Lucian resources that we have lent to the world, you know. And we appreciate him. Let's hear it for Dr. Dalphinis again. Tremendous food for thought on chai manger pour cervelle nous that he has given us today, you know. And let's continue the process of reflection. He has given us so much. In particular, really drawing our attention to the foundational contribution of Africa to who we are today, to our identity, what we are. And particularly mentioned in the area of discipline and leadership. Probably believe it or not, when he mentioned that, you came in my mind, you know. Discipline and leadership that came from the Negmao coming right down. You know. The attitudes of our attitudes today of tremendous, of brilliant individualism, as he called it. You know, that is a huge break. That is a huge break from the treasure that was handed down, or the treasure of community living that was handed down from our ancestors. And his particular attention to Kweyol as a tool of freedom and emancipation, and the need for us to invest a lot more in the development of the language of the tool and in our use of the tool. It calls for Creole, much more Creole in our schools. And in particular, the High Commissions, very, very interestingly, what that draws our attention to is the size of our nation. We're not just 238 square miles of land. We have a nation that now expands around the world. And we can that we need to pay some attention to. And a very, very damning critique that we are evolving people who are more fit for export than for contributing to our development here. Okay, some serious reflection and critique that we need to take on board as we go ahead. So let's continue that critique after a short break, where we'll open up for you your questions and answers for Dr. Dalphinis.
Stage reenactment of the revolt uprising. Story of the freedom fighter, 1795 to 1796. Thursday, August 1st.
Join NTN for a special panel discussion series of Nation Beat, Voices of Freedom, Honoring Emancipation. Historians, anthropologists, archivists, cultural icons, and everyday voices will bring you thought-provoking discussions of emancipation impact on today's society.
Most people in the society have not overcome the effects of enslavement, and we're talking black, Indian, white. Most people have not, but it would have impacted black males in a particular way. But yes, I believe that this has to be discussed and reasoned out within the context of a society that is still resisting a lot of change where the legacy of slavery is concerned.
The colonizing force was not interested in the small man, in the black man, and they effectively were ignored.
One of the ironies of our time is that the time period that you referred to, let's say from Garvey downwards, or you go back to Edward Blyden and them downwards, the Caribbean played a leadership role in the Pan-African movement. It's kind of embarrassing because you had those westernized Caribbean people speaking for Africa. But whether or not, I don't want to go into a deep critique of that. But the point is, the Caribbean played a leading role in Pan-Africanism.
Join us as we acknowledge the journey, honor the courage, resilience, and spirit of the ancestors. Voices of Freedom, Honoring Emancipation, a special Nation Beat panel series on NTN.
Malcolm X asked the question, who taught you to hate yourself? And in reply, I asked Brother Malcolm, who didn't? I mean, who hasn't? Every step towards self-love as a black person is revolutionary. Every embrace of skin, every pleased inhalation, every welcome caress is defiance. Black love has always been self-taught.
Keeping the memory of emancipation alive for future generations, because the story of freedom is our story.
Welcome back as we continue what has been so far a very rich session of reflection on our culture, our history, particularly our language, with our eminent St. Lucian scientist, Dr. Morgan Dalphinis. At this point, we will open up the floor to questions and answers for Dr. Dalphinis. We invite Dr. Dalphinis back to the podium, and we will entertain questions, comments from the in-studio guests. Mr. Jean-Pierre?
Yes. The question is, or the comment is, why not January 1st or February 2nd or March 3rd or whatever it is may be? Why August 1st? Right? I think that if you go out of the studio this morning and you walk around and you ask the next young person out there, why August 1st? What transpired in St. Lucia that led to us having a holiday on August 1st? I don't think that you will have too many of them being in a position to explain what transpired in St. Lucia that led to that situation. Now, there have been recordings of some of the things that were happening in St. Lucia. I think Mike Yobatina wrote a very, probably one of the most underrated novels from a St. Lucian novelist, from a Caribbean novelist, Meg Mao, which captures in a very emotional way, you know, what transpired in St. Lucia around that time and so on. But if we look at the situation of language, it is written in English. Mm-hmm. Already, not many of us read English, but we have some people who probably might understand the story of the Negmao, as written by Mike Yobatina, in a better way, if that story was told in Creole. Now, how could we translate that story into the Creole language to present it to people so that they could better understand the situation with the Negmao? Do you have any practical suggestions as to how we could actually go into that kind of a project of translation of great stories like that was written by Mike Yobatina?
Many thanks for the question. I think that my kind of views are not particularly original. I mean, it's really about structuring the society and parts of it to do that. The first place is, if you want material in Creole, I would be looking at parts of Kamdu, the curriculum section, to do that. because they're set up as educators to know. Some of them have a very good understanding of Creole. Then why not have a section or some of them ready to do that work? The other end usually happens within publishing companies. The publishing company will take a book, and then either they'll find some Creole parts in it, which they find a problem, then they'd send it to some person like me to make sure it's accurate. So Walcott had a program done on the BBC, so they sent me all of the Creole excerpts for me to ensure that it was correct. So the publishing houses do things like that. But if you want a structure in a society which is geared up for such a thing, you have to take your existing structures and say to them, I want this to be done. The other element I'd go for, where mwen ka weve actuellement mwen ka fè tout bagay garçon, si mwen te ka gaje, mwen pe fè tout bagay. So I am now in the realm of invention, and if I could carry out spells, I would do everything. But definitely, I think the avenue of talking books is another one, whereby the book is there and somebody reads it out in terms of any language that they want. But the issue is setting up the structure in the first place. I can tell you now that the British police, although they don't speak Creole, okay, will take items and send it to relevant people for translation, because they have a structure, they have a new intake, and so they're saying, right, how are we going to set ourselves up in order to deal with that? You take your existing structures and you put what you want within it. What I think we keep missing is, the will, what Césaire would call les armes miraculeuses, the miraculous armaments. Yeah? Because years ago, I remember in 1970 something, I was invited here to, not to the Folk Research Center, but invited by the then Jakes Compton to give a speech about St. Lucian Kweyol. And surprise, surprise, I did it in Kweyol. But what were the miraculous arms then? The arms then were, I knew that most of the audience would understand me. But the context now is that we have new generations who've not been induced. We have people who also have taken flight away from their culture. They have consciously decided, you have skin whiteners, you have hair changes, you have you have all types of people, even down to food, so you may ask for certain food, but the person is saying, man, I want to bring you down to get a Big Mac, okay? Whereas you yourself are dreaming of l'amoui ekfawin. So the new context is one that if you want a change, you have to use existing structures and amend them. The thing you're asking for is not problematic, but I can tell in terms of your own work, in terms of the vocabulary needed for teaching Creole, it is not that it is not available. It is not that you have not done the work. But the miraculous thing would be a decision within our structures to say, hey, we have a problem. Kentry has produced a solution. Let us put it to a discussion, how much of what he says we accept and how much of what he says we reject, And then how do we implement it? Because in all of these things, we still, after many years, we fear ourselves. You know, we fear looking in the mirror. We keep dreaming that it will change color. We keep dreaming that it will be something other. The kind of harshness of accepting, mi mwen bon Dieu, mwen kontan ki moun mwen ye. Here I am, God. I accept and love who I am. Those are miraculous. Those miraculous arms are things that we are still working on. You know, I could go on. It affects things such as our laws. It affects things such as what decisions we take in terms of dealing with people who stray from our laws when they're affected by other people. What do? Do we say, look, I don't care what you think, or I care that you are more powerful, I will make this change, but on this one, no. Okay? We need a fundamental change in ourselves. I can only, give you a memory of what it felt like. I was in my 20s. I went to the slave fort in Gorée. And I felt terrible, that human beings could live through this thing. Upstairs was the big rooms where the white slavers stayed, and our ancestors were in this small packed space with only a little slot where they would be pushed out from that slot, and then a little boat, a canoe, would then take them to the big boat. And initially I felt great despair. But I then asked myself a question. How did these people survive so that I'm alive? How did these people live on? They took certain decisions about staying alive and liberty and believing in themselves. They had faced the whole issue of, if you like, the devil, and in Catholic terms, they had said, I renounce the devil. I will be me. Yeah, but unfortunately, in the real world of where we are, not all of us have renounced the devil. Not all of us even see it. Not all of us will seek beauty in ourselves. Not all of us will take that simple step. What you're talking about is relatively straightforward. And we have to embrace the opportunity that the current Prime Minister has made the language and the history part of his priorities. So let us seize the time and see how far we can get with that. But my message is the same. Look at the existing structures and use them to do what we want. If the existing structures won't do it, there are other means in which definitely you can get talking books to do some of these things for you. Or thirdly, you could decide to do whatever it is you want to do just on tape, or disc, and then try and publish it somewhere. Remember, Walcott started off his poems selling it through self-published texts that he was selling around the place. He chose to be free. He chose independence. He chose to emancipate himself. This is a long struggle. Okay, sorry, I take very long.
Just a quick question. I'm a bit fascinated with the relationship between Senegal and St. Lucia. And because we always talk about, a number of us, we always look at Kenya as being the source of a lot of our cultural behavior here. So if you could just elaborate a little more on how the influences between Senegal and on St. Lucia's culture.
Yeah, I mean, that's clear. I mean, because in all of the things that I've said, you've got to understand that African cultures have got more in common than the cultures in other parts of the world. You will find that, okay, if these guys came from the West Coast and went south, it's the same guys under a different kind of experience. If these guys went northeast into Egypt, etc., it's the same guys and girls, okay, under a different experience. So African languages tend to have more in common and their cultures than do the European cultures themselves. So in the European cultures, you'd have the Mediterranean ones, the Latin ones, and they're very different from the Germanic ones, i.e. the English and the Germans. Their languages are different, whereas within the African languages, there's more in common. Now, in terms of Senegal, that was quite clear in terms of where the people came from. Which brings me to one of my disagreements with the whole term Kele. We read Kele as an import from the Yoruba, but Kele in Mandinka means war, and the whole ceremony of cutting off the head of the lamb or sheep, etc., and taking out the blood, that is typical of Islamized Mandinka and other such groups. And the Yoruba, if they're here, they're a kind of minority at the time, and they're coming in long after Creole has been formed. So our links initially, indelibly, are with the Senegambians. As far as the language is concerned, as I said, I gave you the example of Mang, the example also of Ka. Those things are definitely from there. You've also got the marker T. We keep thinking only of PT in French, little. But in Wolof, the marker for little is T. Tuti rek, only a little bit. Only. Rek meaning only. And so you've got those kind of influences there. And you've got the futurative also, and futurative and the negative. I will not eat, ma manger. You would probably translate the mai as mang in Mandinka. There are other influences from Mandinka, but these are words rather than the grammar. So when we go familiarly and talk about bonda, I knew you'd like that one. That literally means backside opening, okay, in Mandinka. Bonda, backside opening, all right? So when we talk about bolom in terms of the invisible dwarf in Mandinka and Bambara, they have a boli, which is basically magic in that language. So all of the compelling initial formations are from that group. I myself had started off without anything in mind. I thought I was going to be a real scientist boy, you know, so I'm going to investigate everything. So I investigated many African languages, asking the same question: what is your structure of the language, etc. So I covered Chui, Bambara, a lot of them. I also covered, to be even more scientific, the Portuguese Creole in southern Senegal, the Creole from Gambia, as well as the St. Lucian Creole here, because they cover Portuguese, English, and French. So if I sifted out the Portuguese, English, and French, and I sifted out the probable African languages, I'm then left with, oh, what bits are the same for St. Lucia? So that was it. So I was lucky enough to go there. I went into the museums, both in Dakar, Senegal, and the museum in Gambia. And, I found some surprising things. So, in the Gambia, there was a thing there called secret document by the British. And in it, it says, we must keep our eyes on a guy called the Reverend Maguire, because he keeps preaching that God is as black as the ace of spades. And not only that, he was a member of the Marcus Garvey movement. So you find things you don't know about. In Senegal, I'm finding this guy. He's going to St. Lucia, and they're issuing him a passport in Gambia and Senegal. As well as that, I find the documents which say, oh, when these black ex-runaway slaves are imported here, these guys start plotting revolution here in Gori. So the link is in written form as well as culturally. But don't be looking necessarily for a Mandinka and a Wolof now, because after they had formed the language, many others were then brought in. So you then have the people from Ghana bringing in words such as whim, mweni whim. You have them also talking about twin, don't cause me trouble. All of those are words later on by later Africans. So one way in which I then did my next sift was, my next sift was the age group of the people who came into St. Lucia. So when I sifted the sample of the slave records, plantation slaves in St. Lucia, house slaves in St. Lucia, you found that the younger ones were the Igbos, and the older ones were the Senegalese. So that gives you a clear correlation as to who came first and then who were the next ones. I then carried out a sift similarly for the people from Ghana and the people from Mandinka territory, and you found similar correlations. The older ones are your Senegambians, and the younger ones are the ones brought in by the British. But I also, to be frank, I also found Senegal comfortable for me. Yeah, everybody wears something like this, So in St. Lucia, we have the same silver bracelet, etc., particularly from the old people. So I didn't feel lonely. The people there were more like St. Lucia at the time. In fact, when they first told me, Binkume, come and eat, I thought, Jesus, these guys want to poison me. They're inviting me to eat. But that's just the nature of that culture at the time I went there. The people were open, friendly, etc. I even met a Rastafarian Jamaican. They just, brought him into their family, which was very different from my experiences in Nigeria, where a very competitive society. So when I woke up in Nigeria and I was going out of the door, I just always reminded myself, it's kill or be killed when I get out of this door, because culturally, the way the society operated at the time, in the way I saw it, was within friendship, tribe, everything. He would do anything for you, okay? when you got outside of the door, it was a competition. So after that experience, I found that culture easier. It was more like, if you like, St. Lucia at the time of my growing up. Ça qu'a fait, monsieur. Ou bien, ok, moi quitte l'auto à ba ou. Ini la clé à dedans. You know, I'm your friend, I've left the car for you. It has the key in it. Who on earth would do that in this St. Lucia? Okay? So, as well as, if you like, the scientific, I found myself more easily at ease within that particular society.
Thank you so much. Merci Chinese for Dalphinis. Problema do Asubai, Kele Sala.
Oui.
Ça a donné une vision Sala. C'est une religion, chef peuple là, dernier chef peuple là, mort. Et nous partageons Kele en conséquence. Nous avons pris moins. Sorti baba du fond côté, qui a dit, c'est pour nous lever qu'elle est ici. Je dis, on me parle de la créa, on me parle de chimère pour faire, parce que je ne pas ça. Je dis, qui a sous avec ça pour sortir. Adam Moukari, c'est judéo-christian, juif fini, juif adam, barrage comme ça. Moi, je veux éclairer nous à ceux qu'on essaie à sous affecter ça là, mais il parle simplement l'agonie du mot à besoin. Est-ce que nous avons nécessité à d'une façon? Et l'autre bagaille là, nous devons parler c'est l'anglais, trinidadien, qui écrit un livre, qui dit sel, salt. Dans le livre, ça dit, la dernière grand monsieur qui dit porté un esclavage, c'est un caïd là. Là, je lui levé, il priait toute ma maille, il discutait, il a volé, il a pris. Et parce qu'il y a un madame qui était là, qui prit la mort, il y a l'agonie. Et c'est qu'il y a des dernières,
Excommunication.
Barrière soumission, avant de passer. Mais c'est maman là qui dit, papa, qui m'a dit qu'il a volé? Nous sommes ça. Pour nous voler, papa dit non. Donc, dans ma sel. Pas voler encore. Comment dire ça parce que est-ce que dit les pendant pour au cabane manger sel, qui a vie douce, qui pas sauvage encore. Est-ce que vous mangez sel? Est-ce que vous mangez sel? C'est pas ça quand on a c'est vraiment. Mais c'est tout comme si vous attendez l'histoire comme ça, pour ça, dis-nous, ça vous attend, ça vous fait là, on a vigé en Afrique, et puis c'est pas ça, qui ça que vous mangé celle-là? Quand l'autre il dit là, il commence à faire sick à ces pays ici. Nous menons sick dans les Afrique, et puis c'est nous, pas de l'écoute. Ay Kweyol bawage encore. Yo ba yo goûter sick. Et puis c'est hadelia, c'est bon à tiaé. So yo penser mon avec l'esprit. Ça yo te li pour aller garder Kweyol bawage soigner yo. Yo ba yo manger sick. Vous avez sick c'est ça. Mais ça va expérience ça dit ça.
Non, moi pas ça rien à sous affaire sick. Excel. Je vais dire ça. C'est l'histoire, moi j'ai joué la tenue yon boug qui supposait sortir l'Afrique et il vient Saint-Lucie et qui m'a dit, il kako, il tenait un gwen kako qui sortit derrière et c'est qu'on a gwen kako vini lever à cette ici avec l'autre pays. Mais c'est ça yo dit. OK? Donc moi pas connaître à sous ça. À sous ça fait bagay ek blié. Yon bagay c'est bagay grand papa moi qui était dit dans affaires qui manière ou ka dit, il te ka mette feuille ensemble et qui te ka di moun bagay yo te ni pour faire pour joindre l'avantage. OK? Oui, oui. Il te ni bagay qui nous tout connaître qu'on ouais ben en feuille. Ou ka mette toutes ces feuilles là en dedans glou et tremper corps en dedans. Et ça ka aider ou. Mais il te ni un l'autre bagay qui là ou ka quitter pays. Ça on dit pour faire c'est point wash. OK? Et jeter des épaules mais pas garder vieux. OK? Et si vous faites ça, tout bagay ka aller bon pour vous. Donc nous te ni ces histoires ça là enceinte ici. À sous affaire religion, nous te toujours ni l'idée ça là qui après nous mort, nous ka lever en Afrique. Et que ça te en dit dans quelle est. Comme moi j'ai dit avant, yo te ni ces chansons hein, qui te ka dit qui si yo mort ici yo ka lever en dit dans Afrique. Et c'est ça qui te dit dans tête yo. Et c'est moun lan qui écoute ça, ka écoute sous ça comme ça yo ka couler syncretism. Qui manière ces religions et ben l'idée africaine j'ai entouré et que nous j'ai mélangé chaque fois et puis bagay chrétien avec l'autre bagay comme ça. Donc moi quoi c'est un bail qui a dit dans tous ces pays Caraïbes là, la teni l'idée qui nous te kay aller élever en Afrique. Yon bout brune qui te écrit en histoire, c'était un béché écrit en histoire sous Saint-Lucie. Et il écrit sur un esclave qui yo te kay panli et qui te ka dit qui bougla kwe qui après yo panli chien bois kay fait et qui kay levé en Afrique. Donc c'était là en dit dans nous pas te vle mort ici, nous pas te vle ça yo te ka couiller en Saint-Lucie, nous pas te vle mort fouette. Nous voulons l'esprit nous libérer. Et peut-être c'est même l'idée à ces Jamaïcains ni les yo ka parler à sous 9 nights. OK? Donc c'est l'idée ça là qui nous t'est développé ici. À sous affaire qu'elle est comme on dit pour moi-même c'est un affaire qui sorti parmi la main c'est Mandinka. Mais si moi dis Mandinka c'était moun qui était en bas islam. OK? Donc yo ni l'idée africaine yo mais yo ka mette bagay qui a wabla te montre yo. Donc yo presque toutes ces awabla ni un bagay yo ka couper tête un mouton et bien un bagay qu'on a pour yo faire sacrifice. Donc il pas te kay un bagay difficile pour ça venir ici et pour nous te dire garder ini judéo-chrétien en dedans. Pour moi-même moi quoi la ni un bon Dieu. OK? Et à pas dit ça la ni religion. OK? Et si nous accepter qui moun te ka crier non bon Dieu depuis temps nous ka accepter qui africain te ka fait même bagay là. Problème là nous te trouvé a dit dans chaque partie Afrique, c'était problème qui manière pour chaîne religion et pour chaîne ça ouais c'est grand moun nous te dit nous. Donc en bout kon Sunjata, il pas te vle entouer religion ni arabe ni chrétien parce qu'il te croit que ça c'est grand moun li te dit te assez. Mais Ishli yon se bougla qui vini après il vini et qui mène religion c'est awabla. Ça il dit c'était kay un bon religion. Et c'était une religion qui te mené ou livre et manière pour écrire. Donc bagay ça là qui manière pour point religion et croyance moun et qui manière pour vivre en dedans en la vie qui kay ba ou avantage. Donc c'est qu'on a moi-même kawai. Ma katan nous hein. Badiner. Oh, fait blague à sous. Ouais.
C'est petit blanc qui sortit Martinique, Guinée.
Saint-Lucie.
Si nous n'y descendons ici toujours.
Ah oui! Non, non, non. Well, m'a pas dit exactement qui est qui est blanc. Mais ça, on est pour accepter. Is that the if you go into Martinique now, yeah, you'll find many big businesses, yeah, with departments like Lacoste and others, and many of them are owned by what the Martinicans call the Béké, the Béché, okay? And those are descendants of the big whites who remained in Martinique and continued. Many of the whites we have here are the whites who hadn't established themselves in Martinique. So, in about the 1600s, looked at this little island they could see in the horizon, and they came here. You could also tell really about the documents on their literacy. Many of the whites in St. Lucia at the time of the French were illiterates, okay? They couldn't read or write, so which tells you partially about their class, okay? So they needed land that they couldn't get there, so they came here, and when they come here, they're not literate. I have not carried out a sift to say to you, well, look, it's this family, etc., who were Petit Béché. I have tried with my own ancestors, my own white ancestors, to check them out, but I didn't get particularly far. But as far as whites and blacks, you'll find no problem. You'll find all of us, or many of us, with partially white ancestors, okay? Because a population which one remark was that it was around 12,000 to start off with. We're now at 100,000, okay? So we must have been sleeping with each other in order to create the higher numbers. My take is that they're either in our blood, or some of them are walking there in the street. The main kind of issue is around the issue of inheritance after the abolishing of the slave trade. What you have to think about is the money given in reparations to the white planters was given by the English both to the French planters and to the English planters. So although these guys hated each other and were willing to fight, they recognized themselves as fellow white people, okay? I even came across, looking at my own ancestry, a slave called Dalphine. She wasn't necessarily one of my ancestors, but it was the nearest I could find in the records on my name. They were actually owned by a J.B. Floysac, one of the family of judges in St. Lucia. Well, I'll tell you a little joke. My mom and I were sitting just towards the beach, having coffee, etc., in a little cafe. And I told my mom this story, and Floysac and his wife were just sitting there. And my mom said, so I had to tell my mom, Mom, I don't know if it's the right Floysac. I don't know if that slave had anything to do with us, okay? But basically, this is the situation we are in. And I think we need to be clear where the money went. It definitely was not spent on blacks. And the white people wanted to reinvest the money, whether it's on the French side or the English side, to white people. And the main issue was not to help us get freedom.
The next question I want to ask is that you referred to the Bajans, the neo-colonial educators.
Oh, yeah.
Was there a connection between the Manco schools? Or they
That-
were established in St. Lucia? Yes. But most of them, the Manco schools were established in the South. Is there any up north?
I really don't know in terms of the micro schools. But
You also mentioned about the Bajans being policemen.
oh, yeah.
And one of the things I have discovered, I've been asking myself, because the majority of policemen are coming from down south.
Yes.
Those lay up north, you can count the number of policemen that you know. But the majority, firemen, policemen, are all coming from Niku, down south and so on. So I'm asking myself, what connection?
Oh, okay, did they settle there? Well, it wouldn't surprise me. But in terms of information like that, there are a series of books which are called the Blue Books. So you've got the slave records, and then you've got, in more modern times, a series of books on most colonies called the Blue Books. And the Blue Books on St. Lucia give you all of that detailed information in terms of what happened afterwards. I'm not necessarily blaming the Bajans. You've got to also bear in mind that neo-colonialism was also facilitated by St. Lucians. So the guy Charles, who was made famous with his name on the airport, the kind of landed people of St. Lucia used to describe him as a wharf rat, because he was not a landed person, and not only that, he wanted to bring in the unions. So as far as the landed, moneyed, probably mulatto legislature of St. Lucia, this guy coming in, a black man, talking about unionism, they saw him as a threat. They weren't saying, look, let's all get together and get the best we can out of this colonial power. So, although I've signaled out the Bajans, it is only because you can define them relatively clearly. I've signaled out the free coloreds, you can see them relatively clearly, and also in the work of Gasper, Professor Gary Gasper, another St. Lucian, Barry Gasper. But in terms of a finer sifting, I then come to what I've said. There are belief systems that we hold, or some of us hold more dearly, which have got more to do with keeping ourselves down. And that, if you like, is really saying that the neo-colonial status is also part of a belief system. So we talk about the belief in white supremacy that is also upheld by part of the belief that being controlled by other people is better. Whether the people are Chinese, Indonesian, French, or white, etc., there are people literally still queuing up for that. So how do we shift that belief system? I'm not talking about shifting power, making sure that the Chinese have no power or money, nothing like that. Those things have to do with established power. But the response to power in the way that we see it. Some of it has to do with ourselves, okay? You could, at a joke level, say, well, my mom was right. Ite vle l'argent. Monsieur Ateni. And I may have been the agent saying, look, I don't know, okay? But genuinely, I did not know. But there are others who would have said, well, I may know, but I won't tell her, okay? Because I don't believe in that kind of challenge. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Dalphinis. But Dr. Dalphinis, before you go, I noticed you were touching and seemingly making reference to a book that looks very, 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 very new, but it has St. Lucia in the title. And with that kind of food that you have given us, I'm wondering whether you want to tell us about this particular book and introduce it.
Yeah, it's this book here, okay? History and Language in St. Lucia. I know there's one copy at the Folk Research Center, but you can get it on Amazon, and basically it covers a fair bit of what I said. I do my graphs. So what I'm saying is based on actual evidence. I was, lucky to go to Goree, and I show you some of the photographs there. It's also useful in that it's a totally St. Lucian book. The cover is done by Jean-Marie, who comes from the Castries area, and others. It's all St. Lucian through and through. The other book is basically one of my poetry books, Bois d'Ifé. So in poetry, I am a bit more straightforward. In my other books, I tend to follow the scholarly line. Do I have evidence? Can I say this? Where are the sources? But this book, I would, thank you, I'd say it's a goodbye. C'est un bon salaison.
Brothers and sisters, let's express a huge thank you. What a plate of nourishment, intellectual nourishment, to crown our celebration of our emancipation for 2024. Okay, our time is upon us, so let us quickly invite the Acting Executive Director of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center, Mr. Melchior Henry, to deliver our vote of thanks.
It's good afternoon now. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all. Allow me to adopt the protocol that has been established. I'm not going to keep you very long. It's been a long morning. We've had quite a bit, in fact, we've been given quite a bit to ponder on. And I think those of us who are research-minded, Dr. Dalphinis is sending us off to do some of our own research. I know I will be doing some of my own research because there are some areas that I'm more curious about now that I've heard some of what he has had to deliver. I would like to say a big thank you to the Cultural Development Foundation and its Emancipation Committee for ensuring that this lecture could take place. And I know it is a bit challenging for them because they have many things juggling with as they try to execute the program for the celebration of the emancipation. I also would like to thank the FRC staff. There are certain things that we had to get done very quickly, and at the same time that we're grappling with the preparation, the planning of Creole Heritage Month, something that takes over the entire organization when the time comes around. So thank you to FRC staff also. I would like to say thank you to NTNGIS staff for facilitating this lecture. I know they're always constrained. The resources are always constrained and so on, and they always try to accommodate us when we ask for to use their space and their personnel and so on. I would like to say a big thank you to the star boy, Dr. Morgan Dalphinis. This presentation is very stimulating. I'm sure those of us who are here, it has given us a lot of food for thought. And I was thinking whilst I was sitting there that we need a part 2 and part 3. There's so much information. There's so much that you obviously knowledge that you can impart and so on. So we're very thankful that you accepted the invitation to deliver the presentation. And as a token of our appreciation, I have Ms. Marilyn Hyacinth who will come up to present you with a small token. Light enough for you to carry.
Merci pour lever conscience nous et puis aussi pour renouveler ces belles nous qualité manger ça au bon nous. So merci à Chay, bon Dieu béni.
OK, merci un peu. Merci un peu tout le monde. Nous savons tout ça qui prend temps avec l'argent, avec moi bien apprécié qui ont servi à sous ces petites paroles. Bon Dieu chebe nous et ban nous force malgré tout.
Okay. Merci encore pour ouvrir vers nous. Et puis, information ou pas nous aujourd'hui, nous pas gaspiller. Et pas nous pas gaspiller. Nous faire recherche nous. Et puis, dans ce livre là au Hamouché nous assurer que nous ce livre ça avec mettre en place recherche folklore. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melton Henry, the Acting Executive Director of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. There's not much left to be said, but a big thank you to the producers of this wonderful and stimulating event. You see, thank you to the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center, the Cultural Development Foundation, NTN, and of course, the government of St. Lucia. With that, we invite you to enjoy the celebration of our emancipation this year. Please participate in the events, and in whatever you do individually, ensure that the conscientization that has started here continues right through our celebration of our freedom. Have a good day.
The act of being free from bondage. It speaks to a process of liberation from influence, control, or the power of another from slavery. It is freedom from a system or systems of oppression. Emancipation in St. Lucia, the Caribbean, or the West Indies spans continuous, courageous, and critical attempts by the region's inhabitants, beginning with the first peoples, the Amerindians, to take back their humanity and reject European slavery and colonization. Enslaved Africans increased and sustained revolutionary activities during the late 18th to 19th century throughout the region's French, Dutch, Spanish, and British colonies. These revolts also influenced unrest among the region's indentured laborers in the British colonies. The Emancipation celebration is a story of African and indigenous peoples' triumph over European white supremacy. It is to remind our people of the victorious struggles of their ancestors and to engage their input in building of a new society, a society representing their own ideals, own cultural, social, economic, and political development, which are the prerequisites for a free and independent nation and region.